Hey, welcome to the Treehouse Athenaeum, a place to discover the tools that empower you to embrace both the beauty and challenges of personal growth. There are so many branches leading to your roots. Come on, let's explore.
Daniela, we did it again.
That's what we do.
For those of you that are wondering what it is that we do, it's look alike.
Unintentionally.
Unintentionally. So for anyone that is listening only, not watching this on YouTube, both of us ended up dressing exactly the same today and parting our bangs the same way. And we didn't talk about it before we got here. But you know what?
Sure didn't.
I feel good about it.
Yeah.
And this is better than being dressed in matching potato sacks. So there's that too.
Yes. Like anything is better than dressing in matching potato sacks.
Yes. Right now we're just creating like a neutral background, right? Isn't that what hairdressers do? They wear black.
Mm-hmm. It's a staple in my wardrobe. I think every day I wear black. So this is pretty normal. But yeah, I don't know what that says about me, but neutral. I like neutral.
I think it says that you're a Scorpio.
Probably.
I mean, there are other colors that wear black. Like, obviously, I'm wearing black right now, and I don't have any major Scorpio placements. But, you know, I was just telling Daniela this morning that I feel like my Leo sun is in the 12th house, which is the house of like hidden things and like endings and all of this. I was like, so basically I'm the Scorpio of Leos.
Yes. It's a great description for it.
Yeah. And that's probably why we get along so well.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not even here to talk about astrology or wearing black.
No, we're here to talk about Enneagram again, and I'm excited about it.
Enneagram. We have such a crush on the Enneagram collectively, you and I.
It is sad. Well, it's not sad. I think it's great. I think people sometimes get tired of me bringing it up, but that's too bad for them because it's just where my brain goes. So this is how I am.
Literally the same. I was in a group setting last week and somebody that the group didn't know as well brought up the Enneagram. And like 5 people were like smiling because they knew what I was about to do. And one person was like, we don't want to hear it, Lisa. So you know what, DK? This podcast's for you. In addition to being absolutely in love with the Enneagram as a tool, we recognize that it can be really difficult when people first learn what their Enneatype is. So we wanted to kind of share our experiences, normalize it a little bit, show you that it is safe to use this as a tool to learn more about yourself and go through some FAQs about it, questions that come up when you're first learning. So Daniela, how did you end up learning about the Enneagram?
So I kind of separate the 2 ways that I was introduced. The first was actually right after my wedding. And like literally, I think it was like maybe a few days after my wedding. And we still had some folks in town and we still had our like bridal party group chat. And you know, we just spent a whole week together. We just spent like 2 years planning together. So this group chat, you know, was still a little bit alive. And someone put in there, I want to know all of your Enneagram numbers and put the test in. And I was like, yeah, okay. And I was busy. Like I took the test kind of quickly. And then I just said, okay, I think I'm a 1. And it's funny because on the test, you don't really see the whole result because it's behind a paywall. So I looked at like the little circle graph thing and 1 was really high and 3 was really high. And I couldn't tell the difference until like I realized that the title, like, you're an Enneagram 1, you're the reformer. I was like, oh, okay. So then I said Enneagram 1 and I threw it in there and just then never looked into it. I was like, cool. I don't know what that means. And then a few months later, because I got married at the end of 2019. So it was like 2020. We were all in lockdown. And one of my friends who is an HR consultant was like, I just learned about this tool. Everyone needs to take this test. And I already knew. I was like, oh, wait, I can just go back and look at my text messages and see that I'm a 1. And so I just put in that I'm a 1. She's like, do you know what that means? That makes so much sense for you. And I was like, sure don't. And then that's when I learned about it. And that's when I got read for absolute filth the description of a 1 and was like, oh, and then that's where my journey started.
You know, this is a pet peeve of mine that I have recently developed, which is when you find out what somebody's Enneatype is or what their like major astrological placements are, and you go, oh, that makes so much sense. And then just stop there. You're like, hello, tell me what that means. You can't just have an inside joke with yourself about me.
Oh, God, I'm probably one of those people. I think I do that a lot.
You know, we're all learning, which is kind of the point. So anyway, what about you did she think was so 1-like?
I think if I remember correctly, it was the process-oriented, how detail-oriented I can be, and also that I just have this, I don't want to call it an obsession, but I will not stop until I get it right. And so I think in the way that she saw it was probably, especially because of the wedding, you know, she saw me kind of put a lot of attention to detail in almost every single aspect of the wedding. Like everything had a story, everything was intentional. And she just saw me kind of like tossing and turning about picking the right thing, doing the right thing, including the right family member. You know, it was so like intense. And I wish I could say that that was the only thing, or that I am that hyper focused in on, but I'm not. It's not. So I can approach almost everything like that. And what's funny is that learning my Enneagram type is actually what helped me be a little bit more decisive about when I give that attention to detail and with what, because I've now realized that putting that much energy into everything is exhausting and it's not really necessary. So we go for high impact around here now.
Ooh, we love high impact, high risk, high reward. I think that each of the types really can wear themselves out by the same means, really. Like you're a 1, I'm a 3. 3 is the achiever. And I often joke that my middle name is Extra. And it's because like I also get very in the details. I'm like, I'm going this to be like the coolest thing. Like I remember one year for my little sister's birthday, Survivor was like super popular. Survivor is still on the air, by the way, for those of you that are wondering. And I was very into Survivor, and I planned this super detailed birthday party for her with like dirt and worms, and I had them eat the grubs really quickly with nothing but like, their pieces, and like there were torches to be snuffed and like all these clues, and I made tree mail, and like I wasn't gonna let any detail go untouched. But I think I was coming at it from a different vantage point than you would have been in the same context. Because for me, I'm like, I'm going to make this the best birthday party for my little sister. And it's going to represent Survivor so well. And everybody's going to know that I'm a real fan.
Yeah. See, and ones can do that too. Like the group chat for my wedding, the name of the group chat was Wedding of the Century. So like, it was like, you know, I wanted it to be memorable, and memorable for the reasons of like, yes, aesthetically I put a lot of attention into like making it look good, right? But also I wanted them to remember little things and be like, wow, that was like really impressive that she thought of that. Like that was like what I wanted. So yeah, it's funny because I'm sure a lot of different types could say that, like, I wanted it to be the best for this particular reason, but that reason is going to be different depending on what type you are.
Well, that might be a cutie little exercise for us to go through. Talk about each of the types and why they might want the perfect wedding. What do you think?
Ah, that sounds fun.
Okay, cool. So we already talked about one. Ones are the reformer, the perfectionist. They want to be good and they're afraid of being evil or corrupt. So how would you plug the wedding planning into that description?
I think probably the most obvious way is doing right by the people involved. One of the other things I put a lot of time into was getting, you know, good gifts for my bridesmaids in the wedding party and making sure that the whole wedding experience was worth their time as much as it could be for being in someone's wedding, right? Um, and then also making sure that I was including and not excluding anyone in our families that would come back later and be like, you were in the wrong for this, or you should have known that, you know, so and so would get offended or blah blah blah. So I think that's a really obvious way is the people piece in a wedding. Um, and then maybe a not so obvious would be I see, and this depends maybe on how evolved you are, like on your journey. But you know, if you're tied to weddings looking a specific way, like there is a right way to do a wedding, you're probably going to do it that way. You're going to be hyper focused on this one specific vision, even if it's not your taste.
Yeah, yeah. And around the time that your wedding occurred, that was like right when tree stumps is like centerpieces were going out of vogue. Like every wedding I went to around that time, like had the tree stump in the middle, or like it was in a barn, or there was like a very specific script that you would see everywhere on the signage for everything, and it made everything look identical. I don't know. So next up would be two. And I feel like two is such a gimme. Because twos are driven by wanting to be worthy of love, and they're afraid of not being worthy of love. And weddings definitely center around love. But that doesn't necessarily have to do with romantic love every single time, even though we are talking about it in the context of weddings. But I feel like for a two, it would be just like, I want to make sure that everybody is feeling like the love in the room. I want to make sure that I include everyone appropriately. I could absolutely see a two wanting to do what you did with giving the correct bridesmaids gifts and making sure that everybody is feeling like they are a part of it, or that like their love is on display, which is where I think wings could come into play, but we're not going to touch wings for now. So that's my take on it too.
Yeah, I think the way to probably differentiate it from what I said is a two is probably going to be more individualized, whereas I was thinking of more broad, where a two is going to be like, I want to make sure this person, like every person individually, feels super loved and wanted and cared for in this particular case, even at my own demise. Maybe like I will put them before myself.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Okay, so threes we talked about too. Wanting to make this like unforgettable show-stopping event because threes want to be of value and they're afraid of being worthless. So I don't know that it would necessarily be about the guests in every single situation. I think it is in many situations, particularly because the three is in the middle of the heart center, like it's one of the three types that processes with the heart as a final check. But it definitely comes down to like, I want this to be memorable. I want it to have been worth my time and likely everyone else's time as well. So that's three. What do you think about four?
Well, I want to say one more thing about three too, because threes are there's like a little thing about threes about having all the people in the room that they know at the same time is like the worst thing that could happen to a three. So yes, everything you said. And also I'm sure that there's this piece of like trying to juggle everyone's perception of what they're going to experience, which sounds like a lot. It sounds heavy.
It is heavy. I've been in those experiences before. Like even something as simple as like going to a conference can really zap the energy out of me really quickly, because I wouldn't say that I have like super different personalities from person to person, but you can definitely see, even listening to the podcast, how my personality will shift according to whoever is around me. And it's more of like, it's like a little energy tweak, I think, at this point, as opposed to like, are you getting summer Lisa or fall Lisa? Like, I've done a lot of work on that, but it is very overwhelming for me when I'm in a group full of people and it's like, okay, well, can I say this inside joke around that person? If I say this, are they gonna feel excluded? It really is such a nightmare.
Yeah. The HR consultant, my friend who introduced Enneagram to me, is also a 3, and she has said that exact same thing. So that's funny.
Yeah. Talk about feeling dragged, man. We're getting started with the 3s early.
Okay, sorry. So 4s.
So 4s.
I feel like they would probably, so 4s are the individualist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would probably, I mean, I almost kind of want to say they would probably not even do a big wedding if they didn't want it. It would be so individualized. Or that would be the main thing about, if they did a big wedding, it would be like they would put a lot of attention into detail into making sure that everyone knew like their personality was in it. It's a different attention to detail, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was probably a 4 who first put a tree stump on a table as a centerpiece.
Yes.
And then everybody else just followed suit. They're
Yes.
like, ooh, that looks so rustic.
100% the 4s are the trendsetters for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could see 4s like leaning more towards elopement or feeling like, why are we doing this? I feel so trapped here. But then 4s still want to feel special. As a default, I think more so than any other type. So I can see where the draw would be to have like your big day. But I think that there would definitely be some sort of element to set it apart, whether it's like creatively, or you do like a first look in a different way, or you decide to do like a progressive dinner for your rehearsal dinner where you're like going to different people's houses for different courses. There are options abound. Have you ever done one of those?
No.
They are
fun and also logistically like a nightmare.
It is logistically a nightmare. Yeah, you kind of have to like live in the same neighborhood. You can't just like live in the same metropolitan area, because that's going to be obnoxious. And what happens when you get to the house with the wine,
Right. Interesting.
So, just food for thought.
I did it one would time. Do that though. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to bring the progressive dinner back. Do you want to move into a compound with me and we can just like have people over?
Listen, I love the idea of a compound, okay? You're not the first one to suggest that to me. And I keep saying, give me a good location and I'll do it.
Okay, well, then let's go hunting. I think it would be so cool to have like everybody that I love like easily accessible, but then I can still go hide in my dark hole when I need it. Yeah. Cool. So 5s. 5s are an interesting one because they have that social battery that like they start out the day and it's full. Well, oftentimes it's full, and then it just depletes as the day goes on. And the 5, or the wedding of a 5 that I can remember going to, like I watched as that person like just really was struggling to keep the battery alive. But it was just it was higher tension, I would say. So I think like, but that's more about the behavior. What we're talking about here is the motivation. So if the 5's motivation is to be competent and they're afraid of being incompetent, then the logic that I'm thinking of here is more like you're doing it so you can appear that you're doing marriage correctly, but not necessarily because you want to. But I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, actually, yeah. That makes more sense. What I was saying about like an unhealthy one, I kind of take that. I don't take it back, but I think that applies here too. It's like
Mhm.
you want to do the wedding correctly, but not in the sense of like the right way, but like you're competent at throwing a party, or you're competent at having a wedding, you're competent at getting married, you were competent enough to get married. Um,
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
yeah. So I think, yeah, that makes sense. My best friend is a 5, and the whole wedding process, her wedding got thwarted by a hurricane. And so they ended up getting married in the conference room of their office because they both worked at the same place. They literally signed the papers there with a witness, and I was like, wow. In the middle, like a day before the hurricane, or the day the hurricane was supposed to hit, or something crazy. And the whole wedding process, I don't want to call it a nightmare. I don't think she would call it, well, maybe she would. It was because it was juggling so much of what other people deemed the right thing to do. And like it conflicted, I think, with her perception of what a wedding should be. So it was just like, and then talk about social battery. It's like even before she knew her Enneagram number, she knew that her social battery was an issue. I shouldn't call it an issue, was short or small, maybe. But yeah, I think it's interesting the way that that happened, the way that life kind of like took that off her plate.
Mhm.
It was not I don't think it was something she was like hyper looking forward to.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Weddings are so odd from that vantage point because it just feels like there's a lot of pressure to have one, or like you're not in love enough, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, it's weird. The wedding industry is weird, but that's a whole nother topic.
It is a whole nother topic. Okay, so sixes. Sixes have this desire to be safe, and they are afraid of being unsafe. Guys, this is what it's like with all the Enneagram types. It's just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is an interesting one. I think that for a 6, the feeling of safety might come from having all of your friends and family around you, because that's like a pretty thick 2C's safety net around you. And then you've got like the safety net also of having a legal document binding you to somebody that you love.
Oh,
Um,
and also probably super prepared with a prenup.
yeah,
Yeah.
I could certainly see that. Not every 6, but I could see that being
Yeah.
something that a 6 would think of and be like, all right,
Hmm.
come on. And you're like, what are we doing a prenup for? You own an empty box of McDonald's fries.
Yeah. But they gave it some thought regardless.
Yeah. And a 6, I think, would be very similar to a 1 in that they would think of like every single detail, but it might not necessarily be like the cosmetic details. I think a
Yeah.
6 is probably the person who came up with like little bridesmaid, like first aid kits.
Yeah.
Like, here's your Tylenol, here's your electrolyte so you don't get a hangover. Like,
Hmm.
very like mama bear. And
Yes.
I appreciate a good 6 so much, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. 7, I feel like, is also a gimme. I'll let you take that
Yeah.
one.
7, sevens want to have fun. They're the enthusiast. So their core desire is, oh, how do I phrase this? I mean, I want to say to have fun, but what's the proper way to describe their core desire?
They want to be happy.
Be happy. That's right. Yeah. Their core fear is to be unhappy. So a seven's wedding is just going to be full of joy. I mean, they're going to do everything. They're big picture too. Sevens are big picture people. So they're going to probably in the wedding planning process have a lot of really big ideas, some of which may not be able to be executed, but regardless, you're going to have a good time. The logistics might, well, depending on who their partner is, and the influence of the
Mhm.
partner on the wedding planning, but if it were just a 7 or 2 sevens, the logistics might not be there, but you're going to have a damn good time.
And that is how the role of wedding planner was invented.
Yes, probably. They found their one friend who was a 1 and
Mhm.
was like, "Can you sort this all out for me? Thanks."
Oh, yeah. I would love to go to a sevens wedding. So Dave,
Yeah.
if you're listening to us, I want in.
Yeah, me too.
Because
And I'm
Dave
a good wedding guest.
Oh, what makes you
I
a
will
good
dance
wedding
all night
guest?
and I will bring people out there with me.
Okay, well, thank you. That could never be me. So I think I'm the person you're tracking on the dance floor. But you know why that
Yep.
is? It's because like I have not practiced dancing enough to feel like comfortable doing it in front of other people. And
Yeah.
that's a very free thing. Like, don't
Yeah.
look at me unless I'm naturally good at this thing, and then everyone look at me and compliment me on it.
Right. Yeah. And that's funny because I grew up in dance. So I don't feel uncomfortable in dance at all. And I know enough. I avoid the things that I don't do well, obviously. uh but I know enough to know already that I'm doing it the right way, so I just don't care if anyone watches or not because I'm like I'm in my bubble having fun, leaning into my growth number by being a little, crazy on the dance floor and having a good time.
So in this case, your value is to be a good wedding guest, regardless of what it takes, rather than prioritizing the inner dancer.
Mhm.
I love the Enneagram.
I love how the motivations work. So like yes, because a 6, going backwards just a little bit, a 6 might
Mhm.
look at, they might expertly plan their wedding in the same way that a 1 would, but it's going to come from a completely different perspective. Like you could have the same output, but the intention that they put into it is going to be different. So I mean, it's hard until you get your number, like to understand the difference because not that it's hard. I shouldn't say that it's hard. It's just when you're listening to a recap of all the numbers together, it can sound maybe like in this case, like a lot of the same, but
Mhm.
there's nuance. And that's the thing is that we all have nuance. So
Yeah.
of course, whether you want a wedding or not, whether you're going to elope or whether you do the big wedding or whatever, of course, there are different options within this one particular case that we've established, but you might have a bunch of different numbers have the same thing. And that just, I'm repeating myself at this point, but you're just, I don't know, like you're an individual. So it makes sense that the reasons that you put into it and the thinking and like all of that is different.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think that with the context of weddings in particular, like there's a standard that nobody ever talks about where it's like it has to be this baseline for it to be weddingy enough for it to be a wedding, you know? And so
Mhm.
I think that there's a little bit more pressure to like mask, I guess,
Yeah.
in like the personality of the relationship that you've built with your partner, or it just defaults to the personality of one person or the other,
Yeah.
or it can just look like a ballroom
Yeah.
without a ton of thought. And I think that is kind of what happens when you don't get very in touch with yourself, because there are ways to do that at like every single budget level,
Right. Mhm.
like I know somebody once that did a board game wedding, and
Oh.
they just had like different board games as they instead of the stump they had different board games. And I thought it was really cute because it reflected who they were, and it gave guests like me who don't like to dance something to do.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so it wasn't just a centerpiece, like you could play the game at the table.
Yeah,
That's
which
so
I thought was
cool.
cool. Yeah,
That's
but
thoughtful too. Yeah.
it is, but like imagine getting stuck at the Monopoly table and like you're the reason that the wedding is ruined.
Yeah. I feel like if I were that bride, I would be picking my least competitive friends to put at that table. Like these are all really nice, gentle twos, and they're all gonna sit here with Monopoly.
No, you take Marvin Gardens. It's your
Yeah.
favorite property.
No, please. You landed on it. Yeah, no, it would just be like, oh God, that would drive me insane.
You
You
did
can't,
theater in high school. You have to have Broadway.
yeah. Yeah, it would, oh God. If I were at that table, I'd be pulling my hair out. I love twos. I love what they do for the world, but it is, it's a lot. It's a lot, especially when you're around a lot of twos, which I am, which is probably why I feel this way because I'm like, just do what you want to do. Why are you so worried about me? My God, like just do what you want.
Yeah, twos are sweetie pies. Yeah. I get where you're coming from though. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
So
everybody
8.
wants to be a 2 as well because they're like, oh, the helper. I want to be the helper.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're like the most mistyped, right?
Yeah, because a lot of women mistype as 2s because they answer it according to like what they think they should be saying. So they're like, okay, maternal instincts, like look at me, I'm so nurturing. You can be nurturing as any type. Any type.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a 2.
It just might look a little different. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the brand of nurturing from different numbers too. Like one of my good friends is a 7, and I can get so trapped in a thought loop and just be really really stuck there, and I just appreciate the hell out of my 7 friend who knows it's like she has like a little mental log of how to distract me, and she knows how to do it perfectly, and it
That's
doesn't
amazing.
feel like it's like a distraction. It feels like just like a hug for my soul.
Oh, that's such a great description. Yeah.
Okay, so 8s.
8s. Huh. That one, I feel like, I don't know. I don't know where to start with 8s. I almost want to think that they would kind of want to be the center of attention, but I think that's because, I mean, you're going to be regardless, right? If you're like the person getting married, but there's this one thing that I think I heard Ian Cron say, and it's 8s are going to be like the loudest in the room, and they're going to say the most controversial thing just to like get the energy up. So I just like, I guess almost related to 7s in that way because they are right next to them, but I almost feel like 8s are going to have this like really, it's going to be more about the vibe almost.
Yeah. And that's because they're coming from this place of wanting to control their own destiny, right? And a wedding is one of those things where you're gonna have, on average, like around, I would say, like 70 to 100 people. That feels right. And to be able to control like the destiny of the night on this night that feels like really significant could be quite the hurdle for an 8. So
Yeah.
I would imagine that they would also be prone to putting more details in as well, so that like they can direct the flow of the energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, I don't know, there's a lot of talk about destiny at weddings as well, like, oh, you're destined for me, we were destined for each other.
Would that make an 8 feel, does an 8 really want someone else to tell them what they're destined for?
No.
Yeah.
They don't, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't like feel that way with their partner, because it can be really difficult to kind of get through an 8's armor, but then when you do, you get a little squishy teddy bear on the inside. So I think that there are certainly exceptions to the rule, but yeah, I think a lot of it is just, this is my big night, I want it to go right. I keep saying night like, you know, like brunch weddings don't happen.
I feel like they're normally nights. I don't know. Yeah.
You can get married at any time of day, all right? We're not trying to confine anyone with this conversation. We're just playing around. We're just a little thought experiment. Yeah. Okay. So 9s
are probably going to do whatever their partner wants. I married a 9.
Uh-huh. And how did that go?
Actually, that's not how he was at all. So I shouldn't say that. That I just, 9s are the peacekeepers. And so their core desire, I don't know the exact way to say it, but their core desire is to like not ruffle feathers. I don't know. They want peace, right? I don't know. What's the proper way to say that?
To have inner harmony.
Inner harmony. My God. And so, yeah, so a lot of times for a 9, that can look like just bending to the will of the person, so that's like you're bending to the larger energy in the room so that you're not causing conflict or whatever. But if you're marrying the right person, then there's not really going to be conflict. Hopefully the other person is trying to get you to express your desires as well, which I very much was. So I was like, we're going to make this decision together. So thankfully he was involved because our wedding was pretty theatrical. So him also, we met in theater. So he was also very interested in that. So it was nice that we also were kind of like in our element in that way. But I can see a 9, getting when they're, I don't want to say with the right partner, because I think it can look different for a lot of different reasons, but I can see them kind of taking a back seat to whatever the bigger wish is. So like maybe they want to get married at the beach. Maybe their partner wants to get married at home in their backyard, and that's really important to them. And they know that they're probably going to be like, yeah, let's get married in your backyard.
Yeah. And let's not forget either that 9s have 8 as one of their available wings. And so, like, a 9 with a beefy 8 wing might be like, this is about my inner harmony. So, I could see a world where a 9 might be like, absolutely not. We are not going to go to the beach because I don't want sand in my shoes all night. And, like,
Okay.
they could be in pursuit of that.
Yeah.
9s don't, I mean, I'm not saying this is what you're saying at all, but like 9s don't just roll over all the time. And I think that's kind of like a common misconception about 9s. So it's like, what is going to make sense to you on the inside? And it's like a different version of 6 in that, like,
oh, interesting,
kind of like emotional safety,
Yeah. Well, right. That makes a lot of sense because also you're probably thinking about the people involved. If for example, you have a family member that is going to voice their opinions and going to cause a scene or be loud about something, you're probably going to take, maybe consciously or unconsciously, take care to make sure that they're taken care of in a way. So if you know that your cousin hates beach weddings and they're going to be super loud about it, and you know that they're going to go anyway because your aunt might force them, it's like maybe you're going to fight actively against a beach wedding.
Yeah. And that makes sense too. 9s have their eyes. They have their eyes on the horizon. They're good at that. And I think too that it's interesting that we used the wedding as context. That was not something we planned, by the way.
No.
Because one of the frequently asked questions that Daniela and I were talking about that a lot of people wonder when they first learn about the Enneagram is, are there types that are more compatible than others? And I know what my answer to that is, but I'm curious to hear yours.
I would say no. It's all in how, I would say, self-aware you are and how, dedicated you are to being the best version of yourself. I think I for the most part think that astrologically too. Because I am friends with a lot of people whose sun signs allegedly don't really work well with Scorpio, and we do. So it's all about how you are using what is already inside you to be the best version of yourself. So if you, going with the self-awareness key, if you know that the certain things that bother you, and you know that certain types are prone to that. For example, I talked a little bit of shit about 2s. So it's like if I know that, I don't want to call it groveling. Here's where you're going to hear my critical lens come out. That's also known to be part of a 1, but I myself, and taking even out of being a 1, just me, Daniela, is not going to want to be committed to someone who is taking so much energy in thinking about, oh, this sounds terrible, thinking about other people, but it's like, it's not, I want it in a genuine way. And sometimes with twos, it can feel disingenuine because it feels like they have to do it. And so I guess that's really where it trickles down to. I want it, if you are like, if you want to be Mother Teresa, I will be on board as long as it's like, I can feel that it's genuine and it's not like, oh, this is my default and I'm just gonna go into autopilot and make sure that you're taken care of. And I don't, I'm not even really paying attention. That's not my jam. So I probably would say in that regard, if you already know that, okay, maybe I have an issue responding to people with high emotion, maybe you're not going to look in the heart triad. Maybe you're going to be like, I maybe don't want someone who is thinking from their heart center, is making decisions from their heart center. I would say you could use it in that way, but also, I don't know, live a little. You never really know what happens.
That's true. And certain types, like commonly mistype, is a different one. So, going to twos, I feel like twos and nines can commonly mistype as each other because both of them are more likely to put the needs of someone else above their own needs. And so there's a difference between wanting to protect your inner peace and wanting to prove your worthiness for love. And it honestly just all comes back to the inner work. I feel like that's such a cop-out thing to say, but it really is. Like, it is. And it also sounds vague. And that's because you have to tailor the work to yourself, and that's why it's so helpful to work with a coach on this type of thing, or a therapist that knows the Enneagram, because they can kind of help you reflect these things back. Sometimes you're saying things out loud and you don't even realize what it is that you're saying. Yeah. And I know that you and I have really enriched our friendship because we're able to speak the same language of the Enneagram, and do that distinction.
Well, and then another one of my favorite things about the Enneagram is how, and one of the things initially that blew my mind is that you can categorize traits of a type by unhealthy traits like neutral and then growth behaviors. And I don't even mean leaning into your growth number, or your growth type, because, the lines all mean something if you're looking at an Enneagram circle. It's not called a circle. What is it called?
Enneagram. Like the symbol is
right.
The Enneagram of 9.
Have told me that before. So, yes. All the lines mean something, and we'll get into that in a later podcast, but every type still has unhealthy, neutral, and healthy behaviors. And when I first learned about that breakdown in a 1, I saw myself leaning kind of into those unhealthy traits. And I was like, ooh, okay, I don't want to be like that, but it also gave me immediately, because I was looking at something that had it all listed right there, I had my answer. I did not have to do all this like inner work and soul searching. I mean, I did, but I didn't have to look for those traits. I already knew what was possible for me because Enneagram told me, and obviously like critical thinking and use your head and whatever, all that. But that's where my soul searching started. So I didn't have to be like, what can I turn all this energy into? It's like, no, I can channel this into this thing. And I'm trying to think of an example, but my criticalness, like I can be extremely critical, because obviously I'm probably pedantic, I think was another one, but it was like, you can get preachy about, like you care about what's right and wrong. And so, yes, you're going to be a rule follower. You're going to uphold rules. You're going to make sure everyone else is following the rules. But also just even like the Enneagram being like, hey, you don't have to worry about everybody else. You don't have to put that outwards. If you want to care about what's right and wrong and you want to follow the rules, that is your choice. And I was like, right. But it's so obvious, but it was it's a good reminder. And then all of a sudden you see yourself kind of leaning outside of that. You learn to take a step back and it's like, okay, I don't have to turn a critical eye onto everything. Not everybody loves that. And I had a behavior to turn that into. It's like, wait for someone to ask for help. And that's like, again, such a simple thing, but it kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. Like you live with you every day. So the behaviors that you have, you're probably not going to be as in tune to them as someone else might be who's like, I don't see that every day. Like,
Right.
I don't live with Daniela's value system. I don't live with Lisa's proclivity for the spotlight, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's, so like the things I was saying about twos and not even taking outside of the Enneagram, but like that disingenuine feeling, that might be an unhealthy response. So if
Mhm.
you are looking, if you have fallen in love with someone and you're like, oh my gosh, let's take the Enneagram together. I want to know what your Enneagram is. And you find out that there are two, you might be surprised because, like maybe they're the healthy version of their type. So all those negative things that you don't like, and you're like, oh my God, I never would have thought I would have fallen in love with a two. It's like, well, because they've worked on themselves. And that's kind of what we're saying. Doing the inner work, working on yourself, self-growth, self-discovery, all the things that we say is kind of hot.
It is. If somebody came up to me and they were like, hey, baby, you want to find out what Enneagram types we are together? I would be like, yes, let's get married.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the fact that my husband can like go through the types with me, maybe he's not as perfect at listing it out as I am, but the fact that we can have like an in-depth discussion about the Enneagram with our friends is like, oh, thank you. You listen, and it means so much.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, that is true of friendships as well. Like, one of my friends, her name is Allie. She's wonderful. And she learned how to be Enneagram literate around the same time that I was like giving all those talks to get my practice in. And she and I will be like, oh my God, this thing happened today. And this person was just, they were just pouring out so hard. And like sometimes that's a bad thing or kind of an annoying thing, and sometimes it's a really good thing, and it's just so interesting to have that language to come from and be like, I see where this person is coming from, and it enriches my understanding of them. And like you said, that's hot. Like I want to know where people are coming from. I want to know what their thought process is. I want to know like what makes them the way that they are. And that's why you should learn about all of the types and not just your own, because it makes it so much better to be in relationship with anybody. I just, oh my God, it makes a world of difference. It really does.
Because at the end of the day, here I am, like I said, talked a little bit of shit about twos. I have a lot of respect for where they're coming from. I understand why they do it. The behavior annoys me, but I do have appreciation for the motivation and what they're feeling inside. So like, this is why I'm friends with a lot of twos. I'm going to call them on it. I'm going to call them on like, hey, if you don't genuinely want to be mowing this person's lawn or whatever thing you've signed up for out of whatever, I'm going to text them and tell them you're not doing it. Like, it's like, I you want me to be the bad guy? I'll put that boundary in place for you. Just let me know. But I just, but I have once you learn the Enneagram, you'll have a little bit of a soft spot for why they're acting the way they're acting. And it does make even conflicts just a little bit easier. I mean, conflict is going to be conflict, but when you can like easily see what triggered them or what triggered you, you can be like, okay, let me walk that back and kind of talk to my inner self a little bit, or talk to their inner self. If you see what the trigger was, you can be like, whoa, I still love you. Like, I don't think any differently of you. You're still my best friend, whatever you need to say. And not to just make the conflict go away, but genuinely because you care about that person and you want to make them feel seen and heard.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, though, there's a pitfall that exists there and being like, well, you're acting like this because you're this number. Like, okay, Daniela, like, you just want me to do this because this is one of your inner values. And it's like, no, you can't just weaponize it. Like,
Right.
essentially what you're doing when you're looking at the inner fears, like that piece of the Enneagram, is you're looking at a wounded little kid that got, a message lost along the way. And that's tough,
Yeah. We all have okay. I used to say we all have childhood trauma, but a therapist informed me that we do not, in fact, all have childhood trauma. So we all have, I don't know, our child selves take in the world so much differently, and we forget along the way how we've internalized that information, because it's just happening so fast when you're a kid.
Yeah, a sponge can't discern which droplets of water it's going to absorb. And it's the same with kids. You don't know what's going to stick with you or why. It just does. And that kind of helps shape who you end up becoming. Which brings me to another point. Don't type your kids.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I know that you want to know your children. You want to understand where they're coming from. It's gonna all develop, right? But kids in particular they're so spongy. There's time. So, I mean, I don't know. You're a mom. I don't want to speak on behalf of moms when I don't have kids. So
no,
what would you say to other moms when kind of being like, I'm curious, like, I want to know, what is my kid?
Don't rush it, and also don't hyper focus on it. Just focus on their experience. Focus on what they are learning. They themselves are going to take it how they take it, and the fact that you're thinking about it, the fact that you want to be able to get through to them and learn about them means that you're a good parent and you're already doing a good job. So don't rush it. Let it happen. And I think they say they're solidified by the time they're 7. But again, you can't type them. So it's going to take another like 10, 15 years for them to get to a point where they are self-aware enough to take the test on their own. So I just wouldn't even worry about it. You know, especially if you're like obsessed with the Enneagram like us, you might see some things that are indicative of a certain type, but try not to make decisions based off what you think they are, because really you're just putting them in a box, and we don't want to do that with our kids. I mean, right? Our generation got put in a box. I feel like we know what that feels like. So we're more prone to not do that to our kids.
I'm mostly with you. The putting them in a box part, I feel like, needs a little bit of elaboration. And the reason that I say that is because the Enneagram isn't meant to box you in, right?
Yeah.
But as an adult, if you're telling a kid, okay, you're a 5, then that kid is going to be looking for evidence to support that their trusted parent or, adult said, okay, you're a 5, so you must love to take things apart and put them back together, or you just are constantly reading. And then they're going to lock in like that. And that's the part where you're boxing them in. Like, it has to be a self-discovery thing, because the Enneagram is a self-discovery tool.
Yes. And you're also boxing yourself in because you might be only using tools that you think a 5 would respond to. And life moves so fast, right? I feel like every parent knows this. Like, just you rarely have a moment to sit down and relax and think through things the way that you want to, or the way that you used to before kids. And especially in a moment where maybe you're in a new situation with your kid and you haven't decided yet how you want to have that conversation or how you want to discipline with this particular thing. You might reach for tools that are readily available to you. And if you think, okay, there are 5, I'm going to do it like this because that way it makes them understand or whatever, they might not be a 5. So you're kind of limiting your parenting choices too. And we don't want to do that. I mean, that's going to make it harder for you.
Yeah. And also, like, one of the objectives of learning the Enneagram in depth should be to learn how to integrate the other types too and make yourself more of a whole person, because you're gonna see yourself in every type, right? Like, you are a whole person. The Enneagram agrees. It's like, yeah, you're a whole
Yeah.
person, but there are some things that are more naturally accessible than others. So
Mhm.
that's the whole thing. Let it be naturally accessible and then work with it from there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's kind of like, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when I think it was like our parents' generation, they were like teaching kids they couldn't be left-handed, so they forced them to write
Yes.
right-handed. But then it doesn't matter, they're still left-handed, you know.
Yeah. 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 I went to Catholic school and I grew up with them still doing that because it's like
Oh,
it's a thing. Um, if you're left-handed, it means something demonic or something. I don't know, like something about the devil is involved if you're left-handed. Uh,
huh.
yeah, I don't remember the full, like the reasoning anymore. But again, my best friend, who is a 5, also grew up going to like private school that was
Mhm.
religiously affiliated. And she's ambidextrous now because she is left-handed, but she had literally had to learn how to do it with her right hand, even though she's left-handed.
Ugh, I would give my right hand to be ambidextrous.
I love that.
All right,
Oh,
all right. I'm whipping out the puns. It's probably time to call it here. So, Daniela, thank you as always for jumping into yet another Enneagram Kiki with me. So much fun.
always happy to do it.
Yup. All right. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us in the treehouse today. If you enjoyed your time here, can you do us one little favor and send this episode over to someone else who might need to hear it? We love ratings, reviews, and recommendations. We appreciate you so much. Have a gorgeous day.